What's good, everyone? Welcome back to Press Turn. Don't be alarmed by my new camera angle. Just trying things out. It's fine. And yeah, this is a video game podcast where we talk about video games. We could also talk about life, but honestly, it's too boring and or too painful. Either way. Um, and today I have with me Derek and David.
Hello.
Uh, Oh, I'm gonna freak out. Anyway, we'll just keep going. David, take us in, man. What you been up to?
Not much. Only played, I think, 3 games. One of them is Tales of Berseria, and also Skyward Sword, and I just started Final Fantasy IX today.
Tell us
Okay.
about Skyward Sword and Fantasy IX first, and then we'll tell many tales of tales.
Well, Skyward Sword is Skyward Sword. I think I mentioned it last time because
I wasn't here.
Oh yeah, you were.
it's pretty much the same experience as last time, so it's awesome.
Okay, I have a quick question. You probably went over this, but I wasn't here. Are you using the C stick to fight, or are you using motion controls?
I switch back and forth to get a feel for both, but I have found that I prefer the stick. It's less active.
Okay, so even though you can't move the camera because you're locked on the stick, or you have to hold L or whatever, it's not too bothersome with combat.
No, once you get the hang of it, it's actually a lot of fun. It's just there's a bit of a learning curve, is all.
All right, you sold me. Be right back.
No, don't go now. We're we're recording, man. Uh, but yeah, yeah, it's kind of good to hear actually that things are fairly positive for Skyward Sword. I feel like, I mean, I don't know, like I feel like for a lot of the faults people had with that game when it first came out, I still think it's pretty good. Maybe okay. Well, correct me if I'm wrong. I remember one of the main complaints when Skyward Sword first came out was just like it seemed to detract a little too far from the Zelda formula compared to Twilight Princess.
Yeah, I mean it is different, but I think in the ways that it deviated, they did it well. So it still feels like a Zelda game. It's not like how much they changed it for Breath of the Wild or anything.
Well, I don't really care about that. The motion controls were the main thing that bothered me. I thought the dungeon design and the characters and the art was very good. And as far as like changing the Zelda formula, everybody threw a fit when Wind Waker came out and about the art, and that game was amazing. So that doesn't bother me. I'm just excited to play it without motion controls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although I guess like maybe it's like you can kind of find like a major fault with most of Zelda of the Zelda games. Not enough that like makes those games unplayable, but they all have like their very distinct issue, at least from what I've noticed so far. So like for
Well,
example, like Wind Waker has the issue of how much downtime there is when you're traveling by boat. Um, Twilight Princess, that one I actually don't know. I guess I guess
the wolf
mainly
stuff, man.
okay. So mainly just like how gameplay was was like divided. Uh, is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, I didn't like playing as the wolf.
Okay.
I didn't mind it.
And then Skyward Sword, obviously the motion controls, it wasn't super perfect. I guess the lore, but I don't even consider that honestly. Um, and then with Breath of the Wild,
Well, here I'll tell you about Breath of the Wild because
okay,
that was the first game that I played Like for about 10 years, I only played Final Fantasy 13, 13 2, and 15. Those are the only video games I had played in about 10 years
Mm-hmm.
after playing a lot as a kid. Breath of the Wild was the game that got me back. And one of my friends was trying to convince me to buy a Switch because of Zelda. He was like, the Zelda game is amazing. And he's like, dude, listen, it's so good. The weapons break and you have to cook your own food. And that was the sales pitch. And I was like, no. And I did eventually buy it, but that was not a good sales pitch.
Yeah, that that genuinely sounds awful if if you were to go off of that. I'm sorry if the clicks and clacks pick up uh, for uh, people who watch the podcast. I'm trying out new stuff, like take notes, because that's kind of important.
A Zelda traditionalist would tell you that the bite-sized dungeons weren't a good idea, but I strongly disagree with that. As somebody that had a little kid and has more kids now,
Mm-hmm.
like give me more shrines and fewer dungeons.
I can as someone who didn't grow up with the Zelda games, I would definitely say when I went through those shrines, they were definitely fun. But at the same time, I kind of wished um, some of those puzzles were just like put into the main dungeons, quote unquote, the the beast dungeons, um, just so that like those dungeons felt a bit more fleshed out. Be- because even the beast dungeons, while some of them were very interesting, I would say for the most part, it didn't really feel like an actual dungeon to me. It just more or less felt like um, another area I had to traverse, like I was doing anyway. So it didn't really it didn't feel that much significant compared to what I was doing normally. Anyway, if that makes sense.
Well, I think part of the problem is the comparison because Skyward Sword was mixed enough that a lot of people were probably thinking about Twilight Princess.
Mm-hmm.
Twilight Princess has, I think, has the most massive dungeons out of any Zelda game.
Right.
Like all those, and all those dungeons, I feel like you go through and you feel like you did a whole dungeon, and then you get the item, and then you're like, holy crap, this is a whole new thing. And then you do like each dungeon felt like you were doing two, to me, and that's not a bad thing necessarily. But if that's your frame of reference, then yeah, I can see how the Breath of the Wild dungeons feel a little lackluster.
Well, also, on the back half of Twilight Princess, you would have to go back to some of those areas, right?
I don't think so. I don't remember that, and I didn't play it that long ago. I just remember feeling like once you got the item, you had to go through the whole dungeon again. You're still in the dungeon, but it was like, oh, now I can do all these extra things that I didn't even notice that that was a thing I could do. But now that I have the grappling hook or whatever,
Oh,
but
okay.
I don't really think you had to go back to old dungeons. But each dungeon was quite a trip.
You do
Uh,
go back to old ones in Skyward Sword, though. I just went back through the Forest Temple last
okay.
night.
You know what? That's what I was thinking of. So I that was just my mistake. Sorry about that. Um,
I'm gonna
oh,
go get a refund real quick. Hold on.
but refunds
It's not
aside,
that bad.
uh, I know there's the infamous one with Twilight Princess. As far as dungeon design goes, where like um there was you got the spinner from the desert temple, and that tool was really cool and it was really fun to use, but you never used it outside of that dungeon. Like it
There are
was
a couple spots in Hyrule Field,
right.
but way out of the way. And yeah,
Oh, okay, okay, gotcha.
That was a little too Tony Hawk for me. That was kind of corny. That's actually my least favorite part of Twilight Princess, I think.
It's only Tony Hawk if there was ska playing in the background of that, which I doubt there was.
Well, I had old No Doubt going at the same time,
Oh,
like
okay.
before they were poppy. No, I'm just okay. Here's my question, David. I'm gonna switch off Zelda. You have my real question is this: you have not finished Trails in the Sky. You have not finished Fire Emblem Three Houses. Why did you even turn Final Fantasy IX on? What are you
uh,
doing?
well, it's because Adam challenged me to a race. He's gonna play through 7 and beat the Emerald Weapon, and I'm supposed to play through 9 and beat Ozma because I've never gotten very far in 9. And winner gets a copy of the pixel remaster of FF6.
Interesting.
Well, at least you guys chose a good reward for this.
Yeah, if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have turned it on at all.
We should do more of these. We should have some more races in the writing chat. That's a good idea.
Races would be
It'd be
fun.
fun. Yeah.
But
And
this
it's
isn't...
not. This is like the whole Pokemon Unite stream or Fortnite stream or whatever you guys do, but for the JRPG people.
There you go.
Oh no. Okay. Well, as long as it's not battle royales, and I think that's fine. Yeah. So
Hold
I'm
on.
curious. Like,
But would Final Fantasy 99 just be like a bunch of ATP gadgets on the screen and everybody trying to spam their commands fast enough to beat the boss? What would a Final Fantasy Battle Royale look like? Wait, crap, they're making one, right?
yeah, I was gonna say, like,
Dang it.
you
In the
forgot.
perfect world, that's how it would be, but they're switching to the action-oriented, so there's no ATB gauge anymore.
Derek, you literally forgot that was happening.
I probably forgot on purpose, and then you ruined me. So, all right.
Understandably.
Okay, so how far did you get in 9 today, then?
Not very far. I could only tolerate so much. It's right after the ship crashes, way at the beginning.
Oh, you're like crushing so many people's hearts with that statement.
Right after the play.
I don't know where they are, but I can hear them being crushed.
If there was an HD remaster or something of that game, I would give it a try again. But I've noticed, and we'll talk about it in a minute about me going back to old games, I can tolerate PS2 games. I cannot go back to PS1 games. There's just too much quality of life stuff missing. And well, I mean, if you're playing the game on Steam, maybe there's like auto skip stuff or whatever. But I don't have a PC, so
I have the PlayStation version.
I just can't do it. I'm too old.
As
The
someone
digital on my PS5.
as
Well, but it's a straight port, right? There's no like quality of life stuff.
Well, the graphics are a bit better, but it's not like a full HD remaster. It's just kind of cleaned up a little bit. Kind of like how 8 is.
I was just gonna say, as someone who heavily relied on emulation to play some of these games that are hard to get, now I've never really experienced this problem, so I don't know, maybe that's just me. I'm not saying you should emulate games. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. Like, Final Fantasy IX for me is one of those games that I've considered going to try out. But then I remember stuff like, oh, but wait, there's also Tactics Ogre, Legend of Dragoon.
You can skip Legend of Dragoon, man.
Okay. Okay, that's good, because what I really need to get back to is actually Suikoden 5 on the PS2. Because I don't know if I ever actually talked about it on Press Turn or one of the old podcast episodes. But Suikoden 5 was like one of the last PS2 games I picked up. And I absolutely enjoyed my time with it. As weird and kind of tedious as it was to try to recruit all 108 members, I still can't believe that that's a thing that they pushed even beyond that point. But yeah, like Suikoden 5 was so interesting of a concept to me, because it was just like, let's give you a JRPG that's somewhat unique in its combat system. Like, you have to consider positioning, and like certain team members had combination attacks and stuff like that. But also there was like real-time strategy battles where like you were fighting in wars, because that was like one of the main things in that game, where like you're trying to raise up your kingdom again after a giant revolt, and you're trying to like reassert your authority as the crown prince, as you try to save the world. There's a lot of things about it, but there was that. there was for me personally was probably one of the most fun aspects of that game were the dramatic battles that were like rock paper scissors fights, but it was pretty much just like you basically had to pick up on dialogue cues, like whatever the opponent was saying, that told you, okay, he's either gonna go for a power attack, a speed attack, or a technical attack, kind of like Monster Hunter Stories 2. Um, which Derek, by the way, I know we've talked about it before, but I personally think you should pick up that game. Um, I'll get back to that in a second, but yeah, what I really found the most fun about those dramatic battles in Suikoden 5 was just like uh, it was like a really fun way to tell a dramatic moment of an action scene, but give the player control of that scene and turn it into like this interactive battle that you did, and that was like one of the coolest moments to me at that time. I've really got to get back to that. I think I was like, I think I was nearly done with the game, actually, the point that I left off, or like at least 3/4 or so.
I know I beat that game, and I remember nothing because I don't have any idea what you're talking about
Yeah,
with any of that.
yeah.
It's a long time ago.
I do know, compared to the rest of the series, that's one of the ones that kind of gets like brushed aside for not being as memorable, I guess, as 3 or 2. Uh, but yeah. Anyway,
So we were talking about Final Fantasy. You went on a tangent about Suikoden, but I thought this was Tales Cast this time.
no, not
So,
yet. We're not going to talk about that yet. Well, well, okay. You can talk about your week. So now it's Tales Cast.
well, hold on. I want to hear David talk about Tales of Berseria first.
Okay.
I haven't made it very far, but even though I'm not a fan of the combat, I'm really liking the story.
Where are you at in the story?
I think I'm still in the dungeon way at the beginning. After
Are you still in the
certain
prison?
tragedy? Yeah.
Okay, so you flash forward and you're trying to get out of the dungeon. Do you have anybody in your party, or is it just Velvet?
I think I have someone in my party, but I forget who.
Magalu, the wizard lady that's kind of a jokester.
Sound.
Isn't that after you get out of the
No.
prison?
I don't remember. Don't spoil anything.
Well, I've seen the trailer.
What?
I forget her name. The person who helps you like break out of your cell.
Oh, I remember. Okay, I forget her name. She has like a mask.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna
okay.
say, like, during that entire prison section, you only have her, aside from Velvet. So
Yeah.
Okay, Sam, did you beat this game?
no, I dropped it after that point.
Oh gosh, I think both of you need to join Backlog Golf. This is out. This is out of control.
No, you can't make me.
I do plan to actually finish the game though, because I am really interested in the story.
I will say, so when I finished that game, I was like, wow, the story was so good. And Jonathan Floyd had one of our other writers had already beaten it, and he was like, yeah, it's not that good. But I think part of when we discussed about it, because I was like, dude, what are you talking about? For me, as somebody that doesn't really play M-rated games, I haven't witnessed a lot of anti-hero stories. And so being able to see that in a game of this level was really good. I will say a complaint I had about the setup of the game was I bought DLC to change your outfit, but it doesn't change the skits, so it was somewhat pointless.
That's
Yeah, Bandai Namco isn't very good about how their DLC works, and I think that's always been a thing as far as I know. Just because like the skits are always told with the original artwork.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, if they were told with the models, then that would be a different story. Which
Well, I like that they're kind of anime. You know, the game is very anime oriented, and being able to see the that artwork version of the characters in the skits, I think, is good.
Yeah.
And it'd probably be a pain to switch the outfits for the skits. But I will say I've looked at like the art for Tales of Arise that's coming out, and the overall it seems like an improvement because it is kind of annoying to have your first game with like just a female lead to have it kind of over sexualized. But although technically Mila was a female lead in Tales of Xillia.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So the beginning story, that is, I do remember that being pretty brutal at the beginning, which I appreciate. This is a little off topic, but if you guys have seen Black Widow, I feel like the beginning comes off with that kind of vibe, and then the rest of the movie is just like jokey, and so it was a really weird
Sounds like Marvel.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very Marvel thing to do.
Yeah,
but it was kind of
I mean, like, remember we're talking about Joss Whedon movies, and Joss Whedon loves his lackluster jokes. I've probably offended way too many people that I care about, but it doesn't matter because I'm not influential enough. But
I don't think Joss Whedon is Joss Whedon involved in that movie. I didn't think he'd been part of it since the second Avengers movie.
Is he not? Because I feel like
no, I don't think so.
I feel like at least with the scripts, they all follow like his style of writing at the very least.
Yeah, I think he kind of changed it with the comedy in the first Avengers. Every movie since then has kind of followed suit.
Yeah.
Well, I googled that, and there's some sort of controversy. So yet another celebrity did something bad. I'm not going to read that right now, but
Okay.
I'll read it later.
Yeah, we have a bit too much about controversies to cover.
Spoiler. Well, okay. Well, while we're talking Tales, I will mention. So, you have a PS4, right, David?
Yeah.
Tales of Zestiria has even worse combat, but Berseria is actually a prequel to it, and you should play that, especially because at least around Christmas time, it was like $9 on the PlayStation Store, so
nice.
it was worth picking up. So what I've played, I've spent like a month since I've been on here. In that time, I beat Tales of Xillia 2, I beat Tales of Graces F, I started Tales of Symphonia, and I started Tales of Crestoria. And I claimed on the hot list to review Tales of Arise. So I'm kind of in Tales mode. Not to be confused with Trails. Those are way too similar.
Blazing Trails, now you're Blazing Tales.
Yep. All right, so I'll go through, I guess I'll do this one at a time. So I played Tales of Xillia 2, which I talked a little bit about last time. And the main thing with that game that I didn't like, the protagonist was like a silent protagonist where you could choose his options, kind of like Byleth and Fire Emblem. But he had a voice actor that did things sometimes, but it worked better in Fire Emblem, I guess. Mm-hmm. Although I still don't love it. But and the story, it's one of those things where they take the sequel and they like add stuff that really didn't even like make sense with the mythology of the first one. If you to spoil another very old game, like if you play Final Fantasy 13-2, well, if you watch the trailer, you know it's about time travel. Well, there's no time travel in the first one. So like that's just that kind of thing of adding that. Just I'm not going to spoil past that, but it's just like hey, here's a whole new mythology that doesn't fit anything you did in the first one. That was annoying. However, I will say these three games, Tales of Xillia 2, and Tales of Graces F, that are only on PS3, so I like eBayed a PS3 to play these games. Whoever at Damco was writing the win quotes, so the things they say when you complete the battle, they were having the freaking time of their lives in 2007 or whenever these games came out, because there's silver 100 in each game.
Maybe
not that high, but
sorry. I'm just gonna interject real quick because I distinctly remember how popular those win skits were. They were so popular, everyone was uploading all the skits on YouTube. Like it wasn't just like oh, here's their favorite skit or whatever. Like there were several uploads of all the skits from different people, just going like, here are all the win skits from like Tales of Graces F. And
these are not as old as I thought they were.
Yeah, it was like as ridiculous. It was so ridiculous because it was just like I remember watching one, and then I watched another, and then I watched another, and then by that point I had, and then like sometime after that, I had watched all of the win skits of Tales of Grace's F in like 2 hours.
I don't change my party that much, so I'm sure I missed a ton. So I might go watch them for all three of these.
You should.
Just to give you a couple dumb examples, in Tales of Xillia 2, like one of them goes, "A job well done," and the other guy goes, "I prefer medium rare." And then my favorite is yeah, they're pretty bad. My favorite is there's a girl that's kind of supposed to be like a ditzy character, and then she, the main character, like do this fancy move with her weapons, and she goes, "Power is strength." Wait, that's the same thing. She just has this epiphany, like, I didn't say anything. The quotes were pretty good, and then there were a couple that I really thought were funny from Grace's F, but you have to kind of know the character stories to get it. There was definitely a lot of in jokes with the characters.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like with all the Tales games I played lately, the story hasn't been perfect. There's always holes I can find, but the cast has really been good. The voice acting is good, and just the humor and the skits and kind of the jokes. Especially, I noticed with this generation, because I'm back and playing Tales of Symphonia. Mm-hmm. They really upped the jokes with the skits. Like in Xillia and Xillia 2 and in Grace's F, they really tried to get as many puns and stuff as they could as possible inside the skits.
Oh, so like specifically that era of Tales games.
Yeah, so I'm basically talking about the PS3 era. There are at least 7 Tales games that you can buy on PS3 still, which is crazy. So, and then the only PS4 exclusive or like made for that generation Tales game is Tales of Berseria, which came out in 2016.
Yeah. And
they haven't made a Tales game for 5 years. So I'm really hoping that this is the Breath of the Wild treatment and that Tales of Arise is going to be that level of, awesome. But really, they went nuts for PS3, and then they just haven't done anything since.
Okay. Will I need to play through all the rest of the Tales games to fully appreciate Arise?
No.
No. I mean, the only ones that are story connected are they're clearly marked, except Zestiria and Berseria. Okay. Because Tales of Xillia has Tales of Xillia 2. Now, going back to the PS1 games, there's a little bit of an oddity because Tales of Destiny got a Tales of Destiny 2, like a direct sequel that's never came out here.
Yeah.
There's a PS1 game called Tales of Destiny 2 that's actually a different game. It's Tales of Eternia. They were trying to basically make Tales of Destiny the franchise at that point, and they were going to have like 2, 3, and then they decided to go back to just calling them each their own name. So the only ones in English that are connected are, I think, are Xillia 2, Zestiria Berseria, and then Symphonia has a sequel called Tales of Symphonia: Dawn of the New World. So those two are clearly marked.
That was the game I was thinking of. Like I was trying to remember what it was called.
Yeah, so but there's a combo you can buy for $20 on PS3 of those two games together, the Tales of Symphonia games. So I just bought that, and now I'm playing Symphonia, which I played those two before in like 2006. So it is coming back to me as I play them. Like, hey, I remember some of this. But the main thing I've noticed is, of course, there's a lot of quality of life stuff. Like you can't invert the camera, the skits aren't voice acted, that kind of stuff. But okay, so I beat Xillia 2, and I was pretty content with. I didn't love the story, but I like the characters. Then I played Tales of Grace's F, which we talked briefly about before, how the art looks a little different. I think this is my favorite Tales game of all 15 or so that I've played. And the reason why the combat's still not great. It's one of the ones where they began goofing with the combat. It feels like, whereas like Xillia and Xillia 2 were definitely the classic formula, and I knew what I was doing with combat. Grace's F, they did this weird thing where you don't have tech points or magic points, and so like basically magic just like takes more of like you have CC, which is like how many you can combo in a row, and it just takes more out of your combo to do a art. And so the combat took a while to get used to.
Oh, okay. Wait, so sorry, just so I understand it. So basically, to activate tech arts, you would have to reach a certain number in your combo to activate it?
Well, no, it's like at the start of a fight, you have like 9 CC points.
Okay.
So what that means is like you could do, if you just pushed X a bunch of times, you could do 9 hits in a row, and then you'd have to recharge.
Oh, okay.
If you want to do
like action points.
Yeah, they're like action points. And if you want to do a fancy move in the middle, it might take 2 or 3 points. And if you guard, you can like when it charges up, you can charge it longer to get more action points. I don't think I played it on easy mode. I don't think I ever figured it out that well. Whereas like Symphonia all the way through like Xillia 2, I understood what I was doing the whole time. It was basically Final Fantasy-ish, just real time.
Okay.
Um, but I will say that I think this one has the best story for two reasons. Even though the main villain is very, very obvious throughout like most of the story, and the character's like, I don't know what's going on. And it's like this is clearly what's going on. It's not. It's not one of those where they do this big twist at the end that makes no sense, and all of a sudden you're going to the moon or whatever, and there's like an even villain from outer space. Like it's very clear, like, well, there's a little bit of that, but it's very clear what's going on. But the main thing they did is they have got a very long prologue at the beginning, and I don't know if you made it past the prologue, Sam. Where like it's 7 years, it's a 7 year time skip.
No, I don't think I got that far.
Well, after the time skip, like basically what happens at the end of the prologue is like when they're kids and they all basically kind of get split up, and then 7 years later it comes back and they kind of reunite, but they get pitted against each other for various reasons. And they just did a really good job of having a story where like this sucks for everybody and everybody is on opposite sides of this conflict, and like characters that used to really um, be together are like not anymore, and they're heartbroken over each other, and they just like the character interactions were really good, like, and yeah, it ends up kind of all happy at the end, and some characters kind of come around and make up whatever, but it feels organic, it feels real. It doesn't feel like, like I have an anime has to have a Sundeer character that becomes nice at the end, that kind of thing. Like I felt like I could empathize with the various things that the characters were feeling and the way they were acting. Now, my one complaint is the ending. I don't want to spoil. I'm not going to spoil anything, but the ending. There's one character that's just like a main character that you've had in your party almost the whole game, who's just not in the ending, which is so stupid. There's a DLC that comes with it, and the Tales of Grace's F, and the DLC is like a big apology, basically, because it's kind of centered on what you expected to happen with that character.
Oh, okay.
So I was
kind of like what Mass Effect did.
sure. So I was happy to play the DLC, which is like an extra 3 hours. But yeah, I blazed through that game very quickly. I was very happy with it.
That's actually interesting because that kind of reminds me of the DLC campaign that they did for Tales of Zestiria, where they added that whole entire separate story for one of the female characters.
There's a DLC chapter for Tales of Zestiria.
Yeah, I forget the character's name. It's
Is it Rose?
The girl with the blonde hair, right? Or like sandy
Rose has
blonde?
the short hair. Rose has the short hair. I know who you're talking about. I just can't think right now. I'll look that up after the chat, because if there is a DLC campaign, I should play that. I've got to consume everything by September 10th.
Keep going. I'm gonna look it up right now.
But yeah, I was just really impressed with how natural the story was and how natural the character interactions were. The skits were hilarious, especially the win quotes. Yeah, and every character was likable. I mean, the bad guy, like one of the, well, I don't want to spoil anything, but who the bad guy is and what's happening, it was really on the nose. But I prefer that to nonsense. Like I've definitely played some RPGs where like I've beaten the game and I still don't understand who was bad and who was good and why. And I'd rather have a direct plain storyboard with really good character moments than like something. I mean, like I really liked 13 Sentinels, but like that meme with the guy that's got the crazy eyes and there's like stuff pin boards and all these pictures on the wall.
Yeah, the
Like
Sunny and
Jonathan
Philadelphia meme.
Floyd sent me a picture. He basically had that. He had written it out and he had like lines going to different. Like he basically was that guy trying to understand 13 Sentinels. And so I don't necessarily want that. 13 Sentinels also had the good character moments. So like as long as you give me like reasons to care about the characters, I'd rather have the direct storyline. So I was okay with that. Okay, so I played those, and then I still have this PS3 that I'm like, technically I was done with. Maybe I should ship it to, maybe I should send it to somebody. Maybe David needs to play these Tales games. But I was like, what else am I going to do on this PS3 before I get rid of it? So, Floyd, again, always goes on about how Tales of the Abyss is the best Tales game, and the first 10 hours, the main character whines and whines and whines. So I did not think that was true. But if you ask people, if you like look at lists of the best games, most people say Tales of Symphonia was the best one. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna buy. There's a combo pack for these two games. I'm gonna play these game because it's been so long. That I think PS2 and games in general, PS2 games in general, have not aged as well, just because HD was such a big jump with PS3. I'm enjoying it. I'm probably a third of the way through already, but I definitely feel like that game was just a huge step up for the franchise that put that franchise like on the map, and also because it was on the GameCube originally, and GameCube had so few RPGs. That's a big reason why it was popular.
Yeah.
But it's definitely it's probably not in my top five Tales games. Like it's good, but the story is also very cliche, and there's I mean, I can forgive the quality of life stuff because it's an older game, but the story could have been better. What else do I want to talk about with Tales? Oh yeah, I started Tales of Crestoria, which is the gacha game. And here's what I don't understand. Like I'm hardly in that game at all. I've just like gotten my first character, and it was I did squee a little bit that you can get like all these characters from different Tales games. But what I don't understand is they have a bunch of characters from Xillia and from Grace's F. So I don't understand why those games have been left to die on the PS3. Like I really don't understand why those are not on Steam. But yeah,
Um,
that's
Honestly, that's a good question because like um like there's one thing when it's like people are talking about how games on the Wii U have been left to die and never get ported to Switch. I can think of
yeah.
several games on the Dreamcast, the PS2, and still on the GameCube, and still quite a few more that have never made it to the West, let alone ports that we're talking about. Uh, and it's just like, and it's basically just like there is no chance of us ever getting those games translated because it's too far gone, and they obviously don't care because they're not focusing on it. The only reason it matters for a gotcha game is because it sells. So like I think like it sells so much that that I remember Sophie from Tales of Grace's F is so highly featured on the gotcha games. So much. She is so popular. And it's like, okay, will there ever be like a remaster or an HD port of the game that she's from for the PS5 or the PS4? No. Because shut up. We're making more Tales games instead. So sorry, you
Oh,
missed your chance, I guess.
what I think is weird about that is that because they haven't put out a new Tales game for 5 years, I mean, other than the gotcha game, you think in that meantime they would also do that in tandem and just like at least maybe not remaster them, but just port them. Like Tales of Zestiria, for example, was a PS3 game, but you can buy it on PS4. Like they just upported it to PS4,
Uh,
and then I played it on my PS5.
I'm
So I'm
gonna.
surprised these weren't just like dumped on the PS5, partially to promote the gotcha game. By the way, Zestiria, it's Alicia's story, and I remember looking that
Yeah.
up, and the reviews I saw were so bad for the DLC that I never bought it because they said it was terrible.
Well, I remember that too, and the impression I got from it was that it was also kind of an apology, but the problem is that it's a side story, so it has nothing to do with the main plot of Zestiria at all. It's Alicia's own story, which is just like I suppose that's fine, but the problem is that uh the problem is that Alicia exits the story early, and if I remember correctly, she never comes back into the story. Is that correct?
And are you talking about in the main game or in the DLC?
In the main game.
No, you have her by the end.
Oh, okay.
You're right. You're right. She comes and goes, but she's in your party at the end.
Oh, okay. Then I guess I just read it wrong. Then, but either way, I know it was mainly just like um she was basically like done dirty and didn't get as satisfying a conclusion to her arc. I suppose then.
Yeah, I don't. I can see that. I don't remember the end. And honestly, now that I'm thinking about this, I'm like, oh, should I go buy this? That game's combat is so bad. I'm not doing this. David, as bad as you think the Berseria combat is, Zestiria is worse. It's by far the worst combat.
I mean, I just find it lackluster, but yeah,
Well,
it's kind of boring.
I just struggled with finishing like I felt like with Berseria, there's Berseria has this feature where like you have they're called CCs and Graces F, but you have like action point kind of thing. But like if you do like her powerful move, like you permanently lose action points for the fight. I don't know if you're to that point in combat, but she can do this like giant like beastly fist attack thing. If you
Not
push
quite
R,
there.
if you push R2, but then she'll lose like an action point for the fight, and then so for the rest of the fight she just sucks more, and so it makes the combat even more boring. Maybe I just played it bad. I don't know.
It's possible that I just haven't figured it out yet because I'm playing on PC.
Well, I
It's
definitely
it's been so long for me. I don't even remember that being a thing, but you could be right. So
for both Zestiria and Berseria, I used auto battle a lot. Now I tried that with Symphonia today. I was behind on levels, and I was like, I'm just gonna put on auto battle, but the auto battle was pretty stupid, and my guys were dying, and I was like, stop. But definitely, if you're playing on easy mode and and auto battle can do it, I'm fine with it. I got really upset in Dragon Quest 11 that had auto battle, and I was like, why am I even playing this game? But now I can actually. When I was playing Tales of Berseria, this is pretty bad. I was playing Tales of Hearts R while I was playing Tales of Berseria. I
that's
was going through the
right.
dungeon. I was going through the
Yeah.
dungeon, and then anytime I got in a fight, I would play Tales of Hearts R on my Vita, well, my friend's Vita, while the auto battle went. So it's bad enough that I was tailsing while I was tailsing. By the way, I've just talked about this franchise for like 20 or 30 minutes, and I haven't really given you a good, like, why play this franchise. If you like RPGs, especially if they're like anime oriented, and you like real time combat, but particularly if you like a good sense of humor, the thing that makes Tales unique is the skits. Like, there's a lot of kind of in party chat, and there's lot of it's humorous, but a lot of it is serious. And if you like having conversations between the characters and feeling like their personalities are fleshed out, that's the main thing that I think makes Tales unique.
Yeah.
And that's all I've been playing. I played the Neo demo for like 5 minutes. I don't know if you guys talked about that last week.
We did not. I was gonna play the demo as well, but I didn't get around to it because of obligations with the Silver Case 2425, which I'll get into once you're done with your week, Derek.
I'm pretty much done. I will just say the Neo demo was enough to convince me I'm going to get the game, but I'm probably going to wait till Christmas. That and Skyward Sword, I think I'll just ask for Christmas because, as I think I told David, if I buy the good games, then at Christmas time I just end up asking for bad games. So I'm trying to hold on and just say, hey, buy me one of these good games for Christmas, and in the meantime I'll play all these old games.
Sometimes the old games are the good games.
I know, but you can't like trying to tell my mom like, hey, I need you to find this PS3 game. Like, that doesn't work. So I'll find the old weird PS3 games and I'll play those during the year, and then I'll just ask for like the new stuff during Christmas.
I mean, hey, I'll help you find the old weird games. I think there's a few you're missing from that JRPG
Well,
list.
you're supposed to tell my mom, not me.
I'll tell you, and you can tell your mom. That sounds like a setup for your mom joke. I don't know why, but uh, anyway,
All right, Sam. What have you been playing?
um, I had to hold myself from my your mom joke right there. I apologize. Still fighting some of those juvenile urges. Uh, so yeah. For last month, I basically challenged myself, and I told Derek, you know what? If you can get the code, go ahead and put me down for Silver Case 2425. Um, I've talked about the Silver Case before, like way back, but just as a quick refresher, um, the Silver Case and its sequel, the 25th Ward, are um, are murder mystery visual novels, created, directed, and written by Goichi Suda, also known as Suda 51. You'll most of you will probably know him for No More Heroes, Lollipop Chainsaw, um, and I suppose Shadows of the Damned, if any of you even remember that game. Um, and I finished. Well, I did complete um, the Silver Case. There's still a little bit of 25th Ward that I still need to finish. But yeah, wow. Uh, that was probably one of the most enjoyable reading experiences I've had in a long time. Um, like the Silver Case feels like a 90s hard-boiled uh detective drama, um beset with like some weird funky things going on, like possibly ghosts, um supernatural immortality, and also probably one of the most interesting um one of the most interesting devices in science fiction that I've come across as well. Uh, it's the Silver Case is kind of a complete package of you just getting hit with like a bunch of things, um, and it's not going to give you the answers to everything. Some of it you have to figure out for yourself. Um, but honestly, it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed my time with it, even when like halfway through it, a lot of the story kind of just becomes a text dump, and you're just going through like constant pages of just like reading material where you're just like, okay, this is what was happening in the 25th ward, these were the experiments tied to the 25th ward, here were the people involved. uh in action it's very boring, but putting the pieces together and aligning all the information that you've learned in each chapter is just kind of like it is just like an explosion, a mind explosion of just like, oh, so this is what the government um, was doing in the story. Um, yeah, it's kind of wild. And sorry, I just realized I went off on a tangent without even really properly explaining what's happening. So just for a really quick summary, the premise is it takes place in an alternate reality of Japan where they're divided uh, into wards, not somewhat like the prefectures of modern Japan, but instead it's like categorized, numbered sections of Japan that are just like all built the same, um, and stuff like that, and it's all sectioned off and quartered. Um, in the Silver Case, it takes place in the 24th ward, uh, which is. Oh wait, hang on. Is that a spoiler? Uh, kind of. Okay, I better not say that then. Um, so the 24th. It takes place in the 24th ward, and your character is part of a Black Ops government sanctioned unit that is sent out uh, to do like disposals. So, for example, in this one, it starts off with you tracking down an escaped serial killer, uh, and has been deemed too dangerous to even try to recapture. So you're just sent in and are told, "Hey, just take the guy out. We'll deal with the mess later." Um, he just needs to be eliminated, and that's just the start of it, and um, and that's like the main plot. But then it goes away for a while, and then like for the next three chapters, you're given like smaller smaller self-contained stories that are somewhat related, um, but are really just their own story devices. And it feels very like I say this in the review too. It feels very similar to the movie Pulp Fiction, where you're kind of like where you're introduced to separate characters and their own stories and what's going on there, and you're kind of just like following along the lines of what's happening in their stories, and then like eventually it comes to a converging point where like they start meeting each other and everything starts to intertwine into back into the main narrative. Um, it it's not so much with the Silver Case. It's definitely a lot more so in the 25th Ward, um, which is a direct sequel to the Silver Case. And honestly, I would try to explain the premise of the 25th Ward, but it does require some information of you having finished the Silver Case, so I can't really talk about it. What I will say, 25th Ward is like Pulp Fiction. Like 25th Ward, I would say, is Suda 51's version of Pulp Fiction if he wrote the movie, is how I would describe it. Because um, in that one, there are three separate storylines going on at the same time. And the second one is basically just John Travolta's and Samuel Jackson's characters. Like that's what those characters feel like to me. Because like there's specifically one point where it's like it basically echoes the scene in the car. If Derek, have you watched that movie?
It's rated R.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to make sure. David, have you seen Pulp Fiction?
I have not. I really never got around to seeing it.
Oh, okay. Wow. I guess I'm with a bunch of uncultured swine. No, it's fine. I don't really care. That movie is not for everyone. I will definitely say that for sure. Uh, Definitely lots of stuff I would not say like, yeah, go watch that. It's totally fine.
But
Um,
this idea of converging separate storylines, David and I know the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson does that thing.
mhm.
I mean, isn't that movie Crash? Isn't that I haven't seen that movie either, but isn't that the same concept? Like a lot of. I don't know if I see that too often in video games though, where you're just doing completely separate storylines and they connect. But okay, remind me again. This is a visual novel, right? Both of them
Yes.
are.
Yes.
To what I'm still trying to wrap my head around why I should play a visual novel in the first place. To what extent, like, what agency do you have as a player, or is it just whatever few decisions you make, the story goes on anyway?
Uh,
Do you have to find things? Do you have to talk to people?
okay. Okay. So, if if I was to if I was to talk to someone and try to convince them to play Silver Case 2425, I would say it's mostly visual novel, but there is some interaction in it. Like it's part visual novel, part dungeon crawler, actually, because
Okay, okay.
you do have to navigate in certain areas, but it's mostly on a linear path. There are some puzzles involved, but in the first games, in the first game, the puzzles are like most of the solutions in the original release. You needed the game manual to solve those puzzles, which you can't really do with the port. So they basically just gave you an auto solve function, um, which kind of sucks because like I would have liked to have tried to at least figure out the puzzle myself. But it doesn't make it clear right away how exactly you're supposed to figure it out. It takes a little bit of time to actually figure out like, okay, this is an encryption, or rather, there's a key to what this password is, and you need to figure out what correlates to what. And it's not like a numerical thing or whatever. It's literally it kind of just feels like it's done by random. Um, And but I will say in the 25th Ward, the puzzles are definitely a lot more interesting. They and in the 24th in the 25th Ward in particular, um, there was there was one time where the game got so meta on me that where it made me do the same puzzle 3 times. But the first two were exactly the same, but then the third one it was just like, hey, here's the same puzzle, but now you got to do it with this different key. And I'm just sitting here going like, this game is trolling me. The game is trolling me super hard right now, and I actually kind of love it, honestly. It was like it was kind of like I wouldn't say it was trolling and that it was like scathing or mean spirited. It was just kind of like sarcastic um in its execution. It's just kind of like, oh well, like, you want more puzzles, eh? Well, here you go. Here's more puzzles. Here's the exact same one but with a different thing. But it's more puzzles and that's what you wanted, right? Like that's what it felt like to me after playing the first game and then immediately going into the second game. Um, it's great. I love it. Like it feels very much in sync with what Suda 51 or like how Suda 51 designs. Like he likes his meta humor, but it's very different from how most other games execute their meta humor. And I think it's like it's kind of it's kind of misunderstood as to like how it's being done. Like because I remember with the No More Heroes series and Killer is Dead, people people who were listening to those jokes were kind of going like, "Oh yeah, okay, it's just an observation and it's supposed to make me laugh." And it's like, "No, it's not supposed to make you laugh. It's to poke fun at it's supposed to poke fun at you at the player for what you think you wanted as enjoyment from the game." Uh, like Suda 51, I would say is very much a reactive person with his games. Like anytime someone complains about his games, he'll do like one little thing in the next game that he does to just kind of like to just like kind of jab at that criticism a little bit and just be like, hey, like um you said there weren't as many puzzles. I added more puzzles. That's exactly what you wanted. Um
That's kind of awesome.
yeah. No, it's great. And like if anything, it's okay. It's crazy too because these two games were originally released on the PS1. Never did I expect that playing these games now would be more relevant than ever, considering that No More Heroes 3 is later this month. Because, as it turns out, No More Heroes 3 is going to be part of a long continuing um, uh, like meta narrative that Suda 51 has done since like uh since I believe it's like 1995 or something, with with a game that we still haven't got. And and I'm like, I think I might have to play that Japanese only game in order to get the full context, or at least read like uh at least read like a quick summary of what happened to that game to understand everything that's going to be happening in No More Heroes 3.
As long as you don't emulate it.
um sure. But yeah, like it's kind of crazy. Like I didn't like really didn't expect Silver Kids 2425 to be like the best stepping point for me to tackle right now. in preparation for what's going to be happening in No More Heroes 3. So like I'm like super excited. I usually try my best to not overhype myself, but now I'm like super hyped for No More Heroes 3 to drop. Uh, like I'm really excited. And this was from a visual novel game. But yeah, yeah, those games are fun. If you like visual novels with a bit more edge to them, I would say definitely check these games out. It's definitely worth it. So much. Actually, wait, hang on. I'll be right back. Hold up.
Hello and welcome to the Press Turn podcast. I'm your host, Eric Thompson. And today, David and I are going to talk about things other than visual novels.
Okay.
Oh, hey, he's back. Never mind. That was a short-lived gig.
Yeah. No, I just had to grab something. So this is how much. This is how much I enjoyed Silver Case 2425. That I went like, yeah, this is how much I enjoyed it. So even though I got a free copy thanks to Derek, who does fine work, for a PR, I went ahead and picked up the deluxe edition of the Silver Case 2425, which includes not only the special case of 2425, which comes with a small art book and the soundtrack for both games, but and this is actually kind of crazy because I don't think these kind of releases happen that often. It also included these two comic books, which were only released in Japan. And this one is kind of a side story in between the Silver Case and the 25th. Oh, or wait. Oh no, this actually happens after the 25th Ward. So I'll need to hold off on reading this until I've finished 25th Ward itself. And then this is a special comic which basically covers the entire first case of the first game. And yeah, it's pretty sick. I dropped full price for this. That's how much I really enjoyed these two games.
I'm looking at that like, I used to buy those kinds of things, and now I know my kids would just rip them up, so...
Yeah, that's why I kept this part of the packaging, at least, for these comic books. Because I know these are going to be hard to come across if I wanted original print. But yeah. Yeah, wow. Again, I absolutely recommend checking those games out. I'm not going to say that to you, Derek, obviously, because they are rated M, so. Excuse me.
Gary!
Okay, so what else have I been playing? I've still been playing a lot of Genshin Impact since the most recent update dropped. Not much to really go on there. I'm just kind of like, okay. Here's the thing. I'm gonna pose a hypothetical to you guys.
We're listening.
Would you, hypothetically, instead of Breath of the Wild 2, would you be okay if Breath of the Wild just kept getting updates instead? Like, it just added more content to it.
I'd be fine with that. That's kind of what's going on with Stardew Valley. Instead of going with the second game, the developer is just adding more and more stuff to make it even more massive.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it, so I think I'd probably be okay with it.
But Stardew Valley is not really story-driven, is that correct?
Yeah.
I'm old, man. I prefer games that have a conclusive ending, and that's it.
But with a game like Breath of the Wild, you can just run around and not do anything story related. It's not really story driven either.
I feel like Breath of the Wild. Okay, Breath of the Wild it maybe isn't story driven, but I thought the story was good enough. I wrote a 1 week devotional and 2 articles about it. Like,
Hmm.
I for a Zelda game, it was pretty good. And there's a whole arc, right? Like, okay, like Zelda has DLC. Like, you can get the bike and stuff. I bought all that and I haven't touched it. I don't care about bikes. If there was like if either of the DLCs for Zelda
Oh,
so far had been stories, I would have cared.
okay, okay. Um, Sorry, I realized I may have needed to preface this for you, Derek, because you're probably, I think you're coming at it a little differently. Um, so the reason why I asked this is because for Genshin Impact, obviously the story isn't done. Um, obviously, like it's a games as a service model, so clearly it's like the story the story is supposedly going to go on for quite a while. Um, the reason why I pose this question though is because in Genshin Impact, say before the 2.0 update dropped, you had already completed everything. Like all the story, all the side missions, you've explored the entire map, um, and like you've upgraded everything and stuff like that, like all of that. And then 2.0 drops in Genshin Impact, and now there's a new region to explore. More missions to do. There's an additional story um, that that's like going into like whatever the main problems are for this new region and stuff like that. Um, so so to translate that into Breath of the Wild specifically, in Breath of the Wild's case, I guess it would be like you finish the story of Breath of the Wild, and then um, like there was like a DLC update that added like a new region for you to explore with some more of the missions and everything. Not as much as the main game, but a sizable chunk, like an 8 hour campaign or something like that.
Let me tell you about Breath of the Wild. I finished the game, finished the story. 3 regions on my map are just dark. Like I didn't go there
Mm-hmm.
because they're not part of the story, and I finished the story, and I went and got all the memories, and I don't care. So, no, if I would rather have a good cohesive story. Now, if the 8 hour campaign actually has a good story, then I might care. Or if it's like chat, maybe if Breath so going with Breath of the Wild, going back to the beginning, if it had been sold in chapters and it was the same story, but like you went up to the first like divided by Divine Beast or something,
Mm-hmm.
and then the memories there, and it was still the same thing, and you bought it piecemeal, I would hate that, but I would probably still do it if the reviews were good. But giving me piecemeal content that's just go do this thing and level up your guy, it feels exactly like grinding my gears to play Magic the Gathering or any other like games as a service. Just be right back. I'm gonna go uninstall Tales of Cristoria.
No, yeah, I mean I get what you're where you're coming from with that at least. Yeah, I mean I'm honestly kind of back and forth when it comes to games as a service because there's clearly parts of the model that I really disagree with, but at the same time I still actively take part in it with games like Apex Legends and Genshin Impact. Um, so it's kind of like on the one hand, uh, they're for the most part they're games that I can at least play casually, even if I wasn't super invested in them. On the other hand, the whole purpose of games as a service as a business model um, is to try to get you spend at least like a certain amount of money. Uh, let's just say per month or per year on a game that is technically free to play, right? Um, and I realize this is kind of diverging from what I was asking before, which was uh, if like what if we just got this model instead of Breath of the Wild 2, which I'm pretty sure a lot of people would disagree. And honestly, honestly, for me, I would probably say I think I would much prefer Breath of the Wild 2 as opposed to a Breath of the Wild that just like kept going on forever. Um, if only because like uh, my my personal enjoyment from Breath of the Wild fits more a games as a service model, but for Breath of the Wild itself, it wasn't exactly. I would say like um, it probably would have been better for me to just finish the story much earlier than than the amount of time I had put into it, if that makes any sense. Because like while I didn't like 100%, like not even close to 100% Breath of the Wild, the point I was at, I was already pretty much as as geared as possibly best as I could, and I had beaten all the dungeons. I had gotten all the shrines, so at that point it was just I just made a conscious decision. Well, I guess I may as well just finish the story. So I think in Breath of the Wild's case is like I don't want that feeling to happen again if I was to pick up Breath of the Wild 2.
I think that's something about Breath of the Wild that certain personality types struggle with, because I know a lot of people that got distracted. Like, I have a friend that has ADHD, and like he was like, I went and chased this fire sword thing, and I got completely lost, and I just quit playing the game. And I know a lot of people like in chat that are like, yeah, I never finished it because I wanted to go do the side quest. I spent 45 hours on the game because it did take a long time to do the campaign, and like if I was basically like I'll go do the divine beast, and if something comes up that's like right there, I'll do it. But other than that, I didn't really, like I said, three parts of the map are dark. Like it's never been a struggle for me to just like beeline the main quest. But it seems like with that game in particular, I know a lot of people that just could not process the idea of like just beat the game and then do everything else, because the game is designed where if you beat the game you just go back, you get kicked right back out to the front of the dungeon, and then you can go do everything. Like there's no missables in Breath of the Wild. Horizon Zero Dawn's the same way, and I did 100% Horizon Zero Dawn, but I did the same thing. I finished the main story, and then I went and did everything else.
Mm,
It's
okay.
kind of the problem I had with Skyrim. It took me, I think, some 3 years to finally beat that story. 2 or 3 years. Almost a full year to beat Breath of the Wild.
See
It
that,
seems to me that I'm the weird one that just finishes the game, but
but
I don't
see
know.
that's interesting though because like and I know for sure we had this conversation before on one of the older podcast episodes, but like I distinctly remember going, yeah, I couldn't stand um the open world in Fallout 3 or Skyrim, but I was totally fine with it in Breath of the Wild. And I think the main thing was that Breath of the Wild was not nearly as big, or I guess necessarily, um, like it didn't take long for me to find content to do in Breath of the Wild compared to like Fallout 3 or Skyrim.
I see. Going back even another step, I thought Horizon Zero Dawn was smaller than Breath of the Wild,
Mm-hmm.
and so it felt more doable. But also the fact that Horizon Zero Dawn has an in-game counter for completion, but also there's trophies, so I knew what I had left to do. I was not gonna, but yeah, there's no way I was gonna do all 200 shrines or whatever in Breath of the Wild. Like it's way bigger, but also there's no like just check mark, right? I mean, you don't have to tell me where the things are, but just give me a list of like how many I have left. Like if I could, like even if like I wouldn't know if I 100%ed Breath of the Wild unless I'm like got a guide right in front of me and I go check every little spot.
Yeah.
Like people that I know that've done it and found every Korok seed, like imagine how much time they also spent bookkeeping, like just to make sure they did it all.
Yeah.
And so that's yet another ding on Nintendo for the trophy thing. Like, if you want, if you now Breath of the Wild really isn't a games as a service thing, right? But people that make games as a service games for Nintendo, like the trophies and stuff, are a way for them to be like, okay, I need to do this thing to do this thing. It's like keeping them engaged. Now, I don't really. I'd rather not apply it to games as a service. Like Horizon Zero Dawn was just like, hey, I enjoyed this game enough to go and do the platinum and do all the stuff. Or like the Spider-Man games, I know are famous for being like easily platinumable on Sony. So, I feel like I've lost track of what my point was here. We need trophies. That was my point.
Okay.
I agree.
Like in your case, you personally need the checklist if you were to play one of these games.
Yeah, I certainly Breath of the Wild was probably too big for me to bother anyway, but I certainly wasn't going to try to do it blind. And as I've gotten more and more frustrated, part of the reason I platinumed the first three Cold Steel games and I haven't done the fourth one, partially because I'm sick of doing multiple playthroughs. Like now, Breath of the Wild avoids that issue, right? Nothing's missable and they just throw you back up front. But a lot of RPGs require 2 or even 3 playthroughs to get all the trophies, and nobody's got time for that.
Yeah. Shoot. I had a point I was gonna say, and now I forgot it. Oh well. We're just gonna move on. Okay. We were talking about my week, right? Right. Uh yeah. I think that's it. I mean, unless you want me to talk about anime, which I surprisingly managed to find time to do a bit of anime, I suppose.
I've only got 30 minutes left, so you
Okay.
want to switch over to let's talk about who's
Yeah.
not getting a trophy.
Um. Well, I mean, that's a lot of people, and only one person can get that trophy. But
That's
but
sad.
least of all,
Everybody at the Olympics is just like, I feel that.
oh, oh, okay. I mean, do we want to talk about that? I don't know.
The Olympics, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't
Least of
watch any of
all,
them.
Me neither.
getting a trophy is probably Kotick of Activision Blizzard. So this is actually pretty interesting because or sorry, not interesting as in like, oh, this is a curiosity. No, uh, this is just something separate where I was looking up as I was looking up the articles for this story. Uh, One thing that was pointed out was that the Twitter accounts in the official Twitter accounts have stopped tweeting, and I was like, okay, let's see who's not tweeting, who stopped tweeting during the lawsuits that are going on over at Activision Blizzard. Activision Blizzard's official account has stopped tweeting since August 3rd, which retweeted Blizzard Entertainment's new leadership statement. Um, and the same, and even King Games has not tweeted anything since the retweet of Activision Blizzard's official statement from Bobby Kotick for July 27th. But funny enough, Activision was still tweeting since August 5th. So they seem to be okay. Uh, it's just a little funny. Like, to me, it just kind of reads like Activision is just like, hey, Blizzard, you got some stuff going on. I'm just going to leave you be because I got COD to worry about. So I'll just catch up with you later. And literally just walked out of the room and closed the door behind him. But yeah, on a more on a more serious note, besides me just poking fun at Blizzard's expense, uh, I don't know if you guys caught the second lawsuit that happened since the first lawsuit addressing the workplace and sexual harassment. Um, so the second lawsuit is basically a class action lawsuit of the investors of Activision Blizzard, basically saying, uh, we didn't know this was happening at Activision Blizzard. Uh, Reads a little vague, but I'm sure the company is definitely doesn't want this on top of uh, the current goings ons right now, on top of everything else.
I have a question about the original lawsuit. The thing that stuck out to me is that the state of California sued them. Do we have an idea of like what it took for the state of California to like figure this out? Did people report? I know there the women that couldn't really report to HR. HR shut them down. Did they go to the state? The state like just do like an audit? Like what?
Okay. Um, just for reference, I basically pulled all the articles that Kotaku has put up, and they have a they basically have a master article um, posted on July 31st.
Yeah. Okay. So I see
Called
that. So they were being investigated by the state then, like
Yeah,
for years.
yeah, basically. The investigation was has been going on for uh, or rather, the investigation had like just wrapped up. Um, I believe like at the start of the year, at least. Um, and then after those findings were after those findings were released was when um, women who had previously worked at Blizzard started showing up and confirming those findings and um, sharing their own stories about everything that was going on. So, like, for example, um, the bits about the cubicle crawls, the frat boy mentality, uh, the infamous Cosby Suite dubbing of Kodak's office. I believe that was the quote.
I
Uh,
thought it was the hotel room when they were at conventions and stuff, but
right. Yeah, no, you're right. That's what it was. Um,
real quick, can we pause for 3 to 5 minutes? I've got a 7-year-old with a problem.
okay, be right back. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so basically, like, yeah, I don't know. In one way, I don't want to make light of the situation. Of like how serious these allegations are. Well, I say allegations, but they're confirmed now. Uh, and it's just kind of like I don't know. Uh, in terms of the video game industry itself, this is more or less like par for the course. Like I don't know if you guys remember um, all that time ago when Riot Games uh, was also facing criticism for workplace harassment at their studios at all.
So yeah, I want to mention this. I think there are two things I want to say about this. The first thing is that you hear a lot of people deflect, whether it's about sexual abuse or if it's about um, race issues or whether it's about COVID. It seems like there's two things I hear from people. One is like, I don't have this conversation anymore. Like, I'm tired of talking about sexual abuse or whatever. Like, can we just get over it or whatever? But like, it's not like we're done. It's not like it's over with. Like, this just shows that like the riot stuff, like that was in 2018, right?
Yeah.
And so like a year later, you're like, okay, it's been resolved, and you just forget about it. You can't really do that, because here it's still going on for the people being abused. Like, it's still happening. And the thing about riot specifically, when I looked that up, their president got sued this year. Like, it's not even over at riot. So over abuse.
Yeah.
So like, you gotta. I think two things that we as people and as Christians can take away from this. The first is like, don't say I don't want to talk about it anymore. Like, you have to, like, it, because the people that are actually being abused are way more tired of this than you are. So like, I think that's a cop out.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to say about it is that it's also easy to say like, that's over there and I'm over here and it doesn't affect me, so I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to stay in my lane. I'm going to do my thing. But for us, it is over here. Even for just for us at Geeks Under Grace to start, like, we get codes for Call of Duty. Like, we have, I mean, not directly through, it's like through a PR firm. I don't think we interact directly with Activision.
Yeah.
But like, even that same week that this came out, one of our tabletop PR contacts that we had interacted with, she had her Me Too moment where she called out her abusers, and she doesn't work there anymore. But I had just set up our new tabletop writer, like, oh, email this person. Well, I didn't know she didn't work there anymore. And so like, this all came out like that same week. And so it's like, it's not just like in our backyard, like, it's here, like, it's part of what we do at Geeks Under Grace. But related to that, as far as it being over there, I think there's within the church specifically, there's an individualism that's kind of started ever since, I feel like, the early 2000s. You know, it's not a religion, it's a relationship. And we've kind of went too far that way with individualism, and so, I didn't do that, I didn't do that. Well, I have recently really tried to embrace the fact that the church is collective, that we bear responsibility for each other's sins, and that we're one body. And so people want to point back to like sex scandals in the Catholic Church, but like, there's been a lot of sexual abuse stuff with like the Southern Baptist Convention and Ravi Zacharias. There's been a whole bunch of church issues lately that makes it feel like where Christianity should be like, we should be the ones reaching out to these victims and being like the shelter for abuse victims. We're like the shelter for the abusers. And so it feels like, oh, that's over there, it's not my issue. But I feel like Christians working on the sexual abuse problems within the church, that in turn enables us to be a witness to these people that are abused in workplaces, whether it's in gaming or otherwise. But right now we don't have our own house in order, so we can't be the witness that we need to be in these situations. Mm-hmm. And because it's not over there, because it's everywhere, and because the same issues are happening in our own backyard, and we're not taking care of it, we're not doing what we should be with everybody else either.
Yeah, the Protestant church is equally as guilty of that as the Catholic Church.
Yeah, I just want to hop on what you said before, Derek, saying like, this can't be ignored. And you're absolutely right, because that was basically the initial response to when these allegations were first brought up. Like, they were essentially brushed to the side. The most notable example was the user Xantia, who kind of like inadvertently became a driving force against the against like the ethics of Blizzard's workplace environment, because of an interaction on a previous panel back in 2010, talking about World of Warcraft. question was her question to the panel was, why do some of the women in World of Warcraft look like they stepped out of a Victoria's Secret catalog? I think, I'm not sure if the person who responded is listed here. But the response was, well, what kind of catalog would you want them to step out of? Which was to kind of brush it under the rug. And I suppose, like, in one way, this could have been like deemed as like not not as bad as it seemed. Like, it could have been just genuinely just like a little bit of humor, but at the same time, especially with like the confirmation to all the findings now, it does paint a bigger picture of not just like what's not being upheld, but also what's being encouraged instead. Which just to like feed it back to what you were talking about in that latter half, which is like not just in Christian communities, but in all communities, there are things that should be that the individual needs to do in order to build the community up. Like, it's not just left to one person. Like, it requires people within the community to address these issues and bring them up. Whereas otherwise they may just be ignored or pushed aside in favor of just like keeping things going, basically.
Back to the idea of fatigue, you talked about, like this user, kind of brushing the idea aside to begin with. Well, also, if you read these articles, before these people that were abused got brushed aside by the media and brushed aside by users, the first thing got brushed aside by HR. So, like, they've been fighting this battle a long time, right, for years. And they said this investigation was a years-long investigation by the state of California. Like, I can't imagine being a woman who's endured this and coming out now and having people probably attack you and critique you for ruining their favorite game or whatever, when, like, you've already been enduring the abuse and the cover-ups and everything since then, and being laughed out of HR or whatever.
Yeah, like I still remember hearing the response from people who currently work at Blizzard, including the CEO Bobby Kotick himself, going saying that they were shocked at the findings. But if the investigation has been going on for such a long time, in my eyes, there is no way that this was unnoticed. Even if you didn't know the extent, they had to at least been aware of the situation at the very least. Maybe not the extent of how far it had gone, but at least, like, who's involved, like, at least who's involved. And I say this as someone who has worked in even in a few jobs where there were people discovered for sexual harassment in months. And like I've worked at a Target, I've worked for a third party company that helps with cell phone sales. Like, it's not hard to figure these out. So very clearly it's not an issue of like discovery, it's an issue of actually addressing the issue. And and like very obviously, the decision was to not address it. It was just to stay the course, and obviously that should not be allowed. I want to point. I want to point to a couple things from the official letter statement that was sent out to all Blizzard employees by Bobby Kotick himself. Specifically, the changes they said will be made effectively. Employee support, listening sessions, personnel changes, hiring practices, and in-game changes. Basically, those last two I want to talk about real quick. The hiring practices, and this is like it's more of just like I'm more concerned about like why this particular language was chosen. I mean, obviously it's part of business, and you know it's very important that certain words are chosen to be as I don't know, I suppose as safe as possible. But it was just that like uh basically being said that earlier this year I sent an email, I being Bobby Kotick, I sent an email requiring all hiring managers to ensure they have diverse candidate slates for all open positions. We will be adding compliance resources to ensure that our hiring managers are in fact adhering to this directive. So the problem with that statement is that the first one doesn't make it clear what exactly they mean by diverse candidate slates. It like that could mean anything, you know. That could just mean race, as far as we know, and that's just the end of it. Like not about like what their work ethic is, uh, what values do they hold dear, and stuff like that. Which I suppose is what the second statement is for, adding compliance resources, um, which is just like I don't know. I find it really weird to choose saying adding compliance resources in place of like judgment of good character. Why compliance? Compliance as far like as far to me as I understand it is like how well will this person uh, work for the company, and how well will they follow what's allowed and what's not allowed, right? Um, when it's like
Yeah.
when it's clearly like it's not like a capacity of what's legal and not legal. It's a capacity of just like it's a capacity of character, like literally, look at their previous work history. What did they get fired? Have they been fired or have they quit? What was it for? Stuff like that, you know. And like it's all stuff that's like, you know, you can still judge it on. I just find it odd that this type of wording is chosen, because it's supposed to sound safe, but to me it just sounds like it sounds very vague as to like what exactly is supposed to be upheld for the hiring practices. And
It
then
sounds like you said we'll hire, instead of saying we'll hire good people, we'll make sure they don't break the rules. Is basically what it sounds like. Yeah.
yeah, uh, and then number five, kind of like a, I'm not gonna call it a slap to the face, but I will call it like a spit at my foot of just like in-game changes. We have heard the input from employee and player communities that some of our in-game content is inappropriate. We are removing that content. Which I mean, like, I suppose like yes, that's great, but then it's like it doesn't make clear what's considered inappropriate from the developer and the gaming communities um, that follow Blizzard's games. It again, like, it's kept very vague so as to not indict any particular franchise that they own. And in retro and like in with the story of Xantia's interaction with Blizzard with World of Warcraft devs, it just comes off as poorly timed because it makes it sound like it's an immediate issue to something that happened 10 years ago and may have been happening this entire time. Like, the thing is, I don't play World of Warcraft. I never had a desire to, so I really don't know, like, uh the extent of like what these costumes are. I've just seen the one in the Kotaku article that covers that specific story with Xantia. Um, but it just seems like number 5 just feels like a band-aid in retrospect than anything. Like, it doesn't sound like it doesn't sound like a proactive solver. It just sounds like, oh well, this happened, so we're gonna take it out now, and we're not gonna address like what we're gonna be doing moving forward. Like, that's what it sounds like to me.
Related to that, I've heard a lot of people talking about boycotting, or like some of the Kotaku articles were like, "Hey, WoW streamers aren't going to stream WoW anymore." I will say, like, and some people in chat have like, "Yeah, I feel weird about maybe I shouldn't be playing this game that's by Activision or Blizzard."
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if you're going to boycott, but then I've also heard some people say like, "Well, I already paid for this game, so I'm going to play this." I feel like this is kind of a hot take that other people might disagree with, but I feel like if you're going to boycott them because you're upset about this, I think you should boycott them entirely, even games that you already own of theirs. Because I realize that slippery slope is like a mathematical logical fallacy, but I think it's a psychological truth.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if you like you're still like, oh, okay, I'm still gonna play this game of theirs, and then you're gonna be like, I really like this game. Okay, maybe they aren't that bad. I feel like you're gonna reason yourself back into like, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. Like,
Yeah.
if I don't know. I mean, that's not, Joe would say vote with your wallet, and you can't really like return the game you already bought that's theirs. But I feel like you're just gonna set yourself up to not vote with your wallet the way you want to vote. And I never really, I guess a related point is I never really know how these things get resolved. I feel like with Riot, people are just playing League of Legends now and acting like it's nothing and it's over. And this will probably fade in obscurity. 2 years from now, people will forget this and they'll still be playing World of Warcraft, which is sad because I don't really, I think in all these issues ever since Me Too has started and rolled, I don't really know what a proper resolution looks like. I cannot think of a single story that's come out of this ever since Me Too started movies and it's swept pretty much every industry. I do not know what like an appropriate resolution is. Going back to scripture again, like, Zacchaeus paying back the taxes to everybody, and Jesus was kind of like, okay, yeah, this is the right thing to do. Like, I haven't seen the right thing done, or I've not seen it hasn't been done, but I don't know what it was or who did it or what it looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, and I suppose I can talk about this a little bit just because I've somewhat been following what's been happening outside of the official lawsuit. So, as far as I know, World of Warcraft itself has kind of been on a gradual downward slope after a certain point with one of their expansions. Where basically they just keep losing concurrent players time after time, and this is basically and you can pretty much follow this just bookmarking when each new expansion has released and just capping that off. And from what I can tell is that the general sentiment is that players have been getting tired with World of Warcraft and are not seeing the vast amount of changes that they are hoping for. Um, and then like just recently, one of the biggest World of Warcraft streamers, Asmon Gold, uh, stopped playing World of Warcraft. I believe, and I believe uh, it was because of the reporting of the findings from the investigation that he decided he wasn't going to support World of Warcraft anymore, and he started playing Final Fantasy XIV instead, which, for better or worse, uh, brought the majority of his followers with him over to Final Fantasy XIV instead. Uh, which, to my knowledge, does not have any allegations of this kind going on within their own company, uh, and also actively engage their community, um, in terms of like uh, updating content and trying to improve the game as best as possible. Oh, hang on. Uh, okay, sorry about that. So yeah, so I think in terms of everything so far, um, this is probably like the biggest point of rapid decline for Blizzard as a whole. Um, just because like people stop playing World of Warcraft, Overwatch. I don't know about Call of Duty. That's kind of its own beast, and that one's squared with Activision, and it seems like Activision is doing their best to, or at least like the portion that is Activision seems to be doing their best um to isolate themselves from Blizzard, even though they belong to the same company. Um, so yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see. Like it's really going to be telling how much this will be affected in the next few months, because when these kind of allegations happened with Riot, I don't think they were necessarily to this level, or at least like there wasn't this much information being given out, and also like League of Legends is also its own IP giant in its own right, and the company themselves have been like trying to keep busy as well and like releasing new content. Um, I don't want to say for the purpose of distracting. I don't know the full story, so I don't really want to say. There is that, um, even though there has been the resolution of that lawsuit earlier this year with the president. So I think it's just like, as far as differences goes between Blizzard and Riot with the handling of these lawsuits. It could be that Riot just did has just done a better job of like balancing this out, whereas I suppose the best way to describe the situation at Blizzard is just that it's just reached the point where nobody can really uh, tolerate it anymore, and now everyone is just coming out and speaking up about it, because now is the time, obviously, especially with official findings behind it to basically support all the stories that are coming out too. So I guess like for better or worse, this was kind of just like the best situation to take advantage of it. it shouldn't require that, but I think that's just how it is in this case.
David, do you have any thoughts?
Nothing new to add.
Well, I've got to go, but I just want to circle back to like anytime these stories come out, we can talk all day about what the executive should have done or what the company should have done, but I always want to go back to what we should do. And so the two things that stick out for me is just to try to resist the fatigue about these conversations because the people that are suffering are far more fatigued than we are. And also just to reject the idea that like that's over there that doesn't concern me. It does.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't know. This is always a tough issue because like it's one of those things where like I don't want to verbally attack anyone for playing a game that I think they shouldn't play. But I think especially in this case, it's like it's one of those things where like um, especially if you want to make a statement, you have to outright um, cut it at the source because anything else other than that won't solve anything. Like you said before, Derek. So yeah, I wish I had a nicer way to end this off. It kind of feels bad to end this on a downer. Um, I don't know.
Sam, we're losing your audio, or at least I am. I don't know about David.
Yeah, I am too.
Are you?
And my camera's having issues.
You should just end it when I said something awesome and then stop.
Okay. Take it away, Derek. Quick.
You sound like an android that's dying, and you're like flickering in and out of the screen.
Okay, then that's gonna be it. This has been Press Turn. If you like the podcast, please like the video, follow, and subscribe.
That still sounds terrible. The like and subscribe stuff you should record separately later.
Oh, you're killing me. Okay, fine. I'll figure that out. Anyway, that's gonna be it from us. Then, and we'll catch you later. Bye.
Bye.